Good morning, it's Vicky McClifty here from AM Healing My Soul TV, and today I'm speaking with Kevin Robinson, and Kevin is a pilot and the founder of Wings4Kidz. Hi Kevin.
Hi Vicky,
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here.
Yeah, that's great.
Kevin, if you could just explain what you actually are doing with Wings4Kidz.
Sure. Well, Wings4Kidz, what we do, we provide a free flight service for children, typically going through treatment for a serious or life-threatening condition. And so the sort of conditions that we talk about is like cancer, for example, paediatric renal patients, it could be cardio patients, and it's families that have to travel long distance from regional areas to access the medical treatment that you can only get at the major city hospitals.
Right.
And so cases like for cancer, for example, about 40% of the families will actually break up through the course of treatment just through separation and long distance travel and the journey they have to undertake.
Yeah, that would be hard.
So what we do, we provide a free flight service to get the child down to get the treatment, keep the family together and get them back home. So we minimise the disruption to the family and the cost associated with this long distance travel for treatment.
So what actually led you into doing what you're doing today?
Yeah, look, back in 2011, I've always been a supporter of charities, and I was just looking to do something more directly myself through business.
Yep.
And I met up with the Children's Hospital, and I heard about the plight of these kids with cancer and what they go through, and something that I've had none of that in my family life or with my kids.
Yeah.
And I just heard about it, and I've been a pilot since the age of 15.
Yep.
And I just saw a real connection there between providing a flight service and what these kids' requirements were. So I was going to do 1 or 2 flights a week. Well, that turned into 2 to 3 flights a week, and then 4 to 5, and then it just turned into full time. And it just became a real passion to help these kids and families in such a direct, tangible way.
So what's the difference between Wings4Kidz and, say,
air ambulance type services, Royal Flying Doctor services?
Yeah, Royal Flying Doctors.
Yeah, okay, so basically what will happen is that when a child is first diagnosed with cancer, for example, they'll go maybe to the local doctor and then end up at the hospital, and they'll suspect that there's like leukemia or a brain tumour. You'll become an inpatient at that point, and you're flown down by air ambulance to one of the major city hospitals, where you might undergo an operation or commence a treatment. From that point onwards, the ongoing treatment that family has to go through, which might be several months or several years, they're not inpatient, and so they don't get air ambulance services. So these families then have to drive, catch a train, catch a bus, and it's just an incredibly arduous journey for that family going forward, where you've got a child who's undergoing treatment for chemotherapy or radiation treatment. They're very, very unwell. You know, long distance travel is just tough on them. You know, it's tough on a kid when they're healthy, but when they're that sick, it's extremely tough.
Oh, it'd be terrible,
and
particularly if they're in pain or anything.
It's a terrible situation for them. So to be able to provide a free flight service to turn a car journey, which might be 2 to 3 days, into an hour and a half, just makes an enormous difference.
That would be massive.
Yeah, so for us it was just something that when you do it and it's so tangible and you see the results of what you're doing straight away, it just becomes a real joy and a real passion, and it's just something we love doing.
So what I mean, you know that I'm doing this program for people that are suffering grief, to help people. I can imagine with what you're dealing with, that you would actually see a lot of things yourself.
Yeah, we do.
And families, like what happens to the families that you transport around? What actually happens to them when...
Well, look, it's tough. You know, you see some very sad stories, and I guess some of the short-term ones, and I talk a lot about cancer because it's so common with what we deal with. There was... you know, a family where a child's been diagnosed, they come in and it's an unknown, it might be a brain tumour, and they'll come out with a prognosis that it's about 2% chance of surviving, and you really don't know what's going to happen through their journey. And then several months later, you might get to the point that you're doing a palliative care flight. It's the final flight for the family. It's their last ever trip down. And I remember one little boy that we looked after a few years ago that we did that final flight. We'd flown them every week for about 8 months. And then we had that final flight down to Bear Cottage at Manly, where they went into that care facility, waiting for the child to pass away. And there's fantastic organisations like Bear Cottage which will embrace the entire family, and they look after the siblings, they get everybody prepared for what's going to come, they look after the child who's gravely ill, and it's a very emotional time. It's very tough.
It must be tough for you as well, because
are
you able to remove yourself a bit from it, or
no.
do you feel,
No, it's hard. Look, I've had many times when you're coming back on a flight after taking someone home, and tearing up on the flight home, and it's really tough because they become part of your life.
Yeah.
You're going through this journey when it's a happy, healthy kid who's just been diagnosed, and you follow that entire journey, and you're flying them every week, so you become part of their extended family.
Yeah.
And so when you've got the news that it's going to be the last ever flight, it's difficult for all of us to deal with.
Yeah.
But it's something you just have to take steps. Everyone's different.
Yeah.
Everyone copes in different ways.
Yeah.
We certainly have counselling services available for the pilots and the ground support people, and I control fairly carefully about who does what flights as well.
Yep.
Some of the pilots are more emotional than others.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We've got a mix of male and female pilots.
Right.
And depending on that person's ability to cope, we limit the information. We actually tell them about what's going on.
Yeah.
Just to make sure we take care of everybody through that process.
That's really good. There's such a lot involved in what you're doing.
That is. Well, it's not only the flights, it's the drives as well, because once we land at the airport in Sydney, you've got to get them from the airport to the hospital.
Yeah.
So you've got that drive component as well.
Yeah.
And the driving is probably more involved than actually the flying.
Right.
Because as a pilot, you're up the front, you're doing the flight, the family's in the back, you're not really talking, you're busy, doing your pilot stuff.
Yeah.
And so when you do the drive, you're engaged in conversation.
Yeah.
And that's probably when you get more closely connected with the families and the kids and the people, and so the drivers have got probably a more emotional attachment to the families than what even the pilots do.
Yeah, because it's like a family away from home for them, really, isn't it? When
absolutely.
they've got to go, when you're going through such an emotional journey as well, it does bring people closer together. Everyone wants to. It's just the natural instinct for people to want to be able to help.
There's a common need there, and you all gravitate towards that. The kid becomes the focus, and the family, and you want to help, and you want the best for all concerned. So,
I think it's such a wonderful idea that you're able to eliminate that lengthy period of time of travelling to the hospitals for the family, because what would happen normally for someone who, say, lives in regional New South Wales and they have to go to Westmead? Like, what would be the process?
In cancer, for example, about 40% of the families break up. Okay. Because what they have to do, the child can't use a commercial flight because they're immunocompromised. Those families have to isolate themselves from the general public.
Yep.
They do it by road, they drive backwards and forwards, but with a very, very ill child doing long distance travel, it's tough.
Yeah.
And then there's just the cost, the financial cost of doing the travel and accommodation. If you can't get into somewhere like Ronald McDonald House, you're going to have to pay for a hotel, which is like $180, $200 a night. And so if you're there for a week, you've got $1,000 in accommodation. And
then there's a medical bill as well.
All the medical, that all adds up. And so you've got that for several months. And so a lot of families, they'll end up selling the home.
Yeah.
It'll cause family breakdown.
Yeah.
The siblings in the family can no longer have holidays, and the normality of life is gone for them.
Yeah.
So they've now got a very sick brother or sister. And so things like school excursions, holidays, getting nice presents at Christmas, birthdays, all that's gone.
Yeah.
So everyone's life changes quite dramatically. It's not just about helping that child, it's about helping the entire family through the course of that treatment. Yeah. And then you talk about conditions like the genetic conditions, cerebral palsy, where really that's several years, tens of years. Yeah. It's ongoing treatment. It doesn't stop for these families. Yeah. And when you talk about the genetic conditions, it's like about 80% of the families with some of these conditions will break up. Yeah. Paediatric renal on dialysis, about 70% of the families will break up. They just don't get to go home. They're in a hospital bed receiving dialysis for 5 to 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 12 to 18 months, and you as a parent are sitting there beside that child in that bed. You can't go home.
Is there anyone to support the parent when
look,
there?
There's so many social network groups out there. There's the social workers are incredible. I mean, the nurses, the doctors, the social workers are amazing. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, it's nothing like being at home and having the support of your own family network. Yeah. I mean, being able to get that child back home into their own bed and sleep in their own bed, bit of home cooking. See the cat and the dog and the pets. Yeah. I mean,
that's huge, isn't it?
Having siblings around.
Yeah, if you're cutting their journey by I think you were mentioning to me before, it was taking 3 weeks or something for the trip to actually, because the boy was very sick.
There was one child that we're looking after, and he was on an experimental radioactive isotope.
That's it,
And so what would happen with that child is that they'd start the isotope treatment at home, and then they'd have a 3-day drive to Sydney, because the child would get car sick all the way. He had a brain tumour. You get car sick all the way to Sydney. Then they've got to get him well enough for the chemo radiation treatment, so a few days doing that. Then they have a week of chemo radiation. Then they've got to get him well enough for the drive home, and then they've got the 3-day drive back. So that journey's about 3 weeks that they need to undertake. So it's a really tough journey. For that same child, what we did is we now pick them up on a Monday morning. We fly them to the hospital, straight into treatment. They love the flight. They get on the plane and they just really enjoy the flight.
The kids would really enjoy
as
that.
As opposed to a car drive. They love doing the flight. So 1 hour trip down there, into hospital, do the treatment. Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock, back in the car, down to the airport, hour flight home, and they've got 3 weeks at home to recover, get looked after, the family's together, in his own bed, resting well. I mean, we all know sleeping in a hospital bed is not great.
You don't sleep?
So, or in accommodation areas, whether it's a hotel or Ronald McDonald House, it's not home, it's not your own bed, it's not your own pillow. It's a different environment. So to be able to get that child back home and sleeping in their own bed, and mum being back there to look after the family, because typically it's mum down with one and dad's back at home trying to hold down the job.
And you can understand why the families do split up with that
well,
dad's trying
to, hold down his job. He's trying to do this kid's schoolwork. He's trying to do the lunches and do the washing, all the things that we do really badly. So dad's there trying to do that, and the place is falling apart at the seams. And then mum comes home at the end of the week hoping that it's all clean, and it's not. And you imagine the stress that causes in the relationship.
It does.
That mum's already stressed from everything that's going home and coming home, and things aren't the way they normally are.
Life can be stressful without all
Your
that
life is
in our
turned
lives.
upside down. It's completely turned upside down, and that's what rips the families apart at the end of the day.
Terrible.
It's really, really tough.
So how does it make you feel to be able to provide this for these families?
Oh, look, it's incredibly fulfilling to know that you've made, and you see the difference on the day. The great thing about what we do, you do the flight and you see the immediate impact of what you've done and how you've helped the family and the difference it made to their life, and knowing that child is back home in a loving household and getting taken care of, and the parents are just so thankful. It's such a practical way of helping, but it means so much to them. It's such an important time in their life. I mean, this is the most traumatic time of their life.
That's definitely
ever.
true.
It's a life and death scenario. Total uncertainty. Nobody knows what's going to happen, and everyone's on a journey with it. So
and the more people that rally in and can help and support, that's so important to have that little community around you when you're going through such stress, which causes a lot of grief. Just the lifestyle can cause a lot of grief. Because it's not just the fact that you may lose a child, but it's even if they're okay, if it's something chronic that they've got for a long period of time, they've got that forever. And it's a loss of what they would have hoped for their child as well. So it covers a whole lot of bases. But if they've got that constant, I can imagine if you've got someone who's always needing medical treatment that has a chronic condition, you would be like part of their family.
Oh, absolutely.
Because they get to know you so well, because they've got to keep on going.
You're part of their life. You're part of their journey. It's, the message comes through. We've got to be down for treatment again on Thursday, and
but it makes it takes away the stress of having to go. How a normal person would think, oh no, I've got to go to the doctors. Oh, I don't want to go. Or you've got to have treatment or an operation or something. But have that community around you, which is what you're providing for them. It takes away that stress for the one who's sick and for the whole family.
It's one important component that's dealt with, and they can focus on the other things to take care of themselves as parents, stay together for the kids, keep the kids together, just try to put a positive component back into this terrible situation that you've made an important difference in just one area of their life through this journey.
That is so important. So what is your future plans for Wings4Kidz?
Well, look, at the moment, we're heavily focused on New South Wales. So the goal for New South Wales is to deliver 1,000 flights a year in New South Wales, and then we want to replicate that service for Queensland, Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania. So we're already doing flights into Queensland. We just did a flight recently up into Warwick. And for a child where they'd really run out of options here in Queensland medically.
Yep.
And it's quite a serious, very rare condition.
Okay.
And a professor down in Campbelltown Hospital heard about this family and took it on as a project to say, look, I want to try and help you.
Fantastic.
But that child, she's in such a condition that a half-hour car journey for her is impossible. So catching commercial flights out of the question, doing it by roads out of the question. So what do? They can't come by air ambulance. They're not an inpatient, so they're out of options. So we've taken them on as a family.
Right.
And so we'll make sure that they go through that treatment process and they'll undergo their first operation in October.
That's fantastic.
And then their journey from that point forward is that they'll need to live within 20 minutes of a major hospital for the rest of her life.
Wow.
So this is not just, and this is the difference I was saying before between air ambulance and what we do. An air ambulance will get an inpatient and they'll do that one journey for that family to get them. Yeah. We've got the entire journey for their life. Yeah. Which might be the next 10, 15,
As
20
I said,
years.
you're part of the family.
Yeah. So it's continual flights and it might be every month, it might be every 6 months, it might be, you just don't know. Yeah. You know, so it's a whole variety of doing, from once or twice a week through to once every 6 months that we're doing the flights for these families. So you become very, very involved.
Yeah, you're the extended family.
Absolutely, yeah. And we like being the extended family.
Uncle
we
Kevin.
Enjoy it. Yes, yeah, we enjoy that. Yeah.
So what's involved now for you to actually expand around Australia, like on the eastern side anyway?
Look, what we need to do is just really raise awareness of our service and what we do and how we do it. It's quite unique what we do. Yeah. There's other great services like Angel Flight out there, which are a volunteer flight service. Right. And they do a similar thing. Yep. But what we do is very much on a scheduled service where we have our own aircraft and own pilots. Yes. And you can schedule your flights in with us. Right. So you're not relying on a volunteer being available on the day. Yep. We've got people there available where we book them in and they're volunteering to do the flight on that day. Right. With our own aircraft. And so we really complement areas like Angel Flight. Yep. So we complement their service and what they do. Yeah. And it's unique in how we deliver it and the level of aircraft and the pilots involved. Yeah, so we've just got to build awareness, get people involved, get some sponsors on board. Yeah. It's all about funding at the end of the day.
It is, and that's probably the tough part of it.
It's expensive flying. It's not cheap.
Oh no, it wouldn't be.
But a great thing that we do also is we make sure within our constitution that 100% of the donation actually goes to the cause. So we don't have any admin, we don't have any wages. Yeah. Nothing is caught up in the running of the charity. Yep. 100% of the public donations go to the cause, and that's something that's also been very, very important to us to make sure that if people are supporting us with a donation, it's actually going to help the family. Yeah. It's not going to pay someone's wage or...
That is so important for everyone to know that, because, it funds, you often wonder when you give to charity sometimes where the funds go to. So
and it's an important thing. People need to know how the money is being spent. Yeah. And the administration side of the business, we support that through our own businesses. So the people involved in our charity, they've got their own jobs, their daytime jobs, right, and they've got their own businesses, and we support the administration side of what we do through that.
Yeah, well, that all sounds so amazing, Kevin, what you're doing, and Wings4Kidz, it's just, I can see that it will just grow across the eastern seaboard of Australia, and who knows, it could end up across to Perth and Western Australia as well. But it's just such a wonderful concept to be able to help these people, families that are stuck with these situations with their children who are so sick. And I'm just take my hat off to you with what you're doing. It's just fantastic.
No, thank you.
And I really thank you so much for flying up here today to actually do the interview, and no, really very much appreciated.
No, look, I appreciate your support. It's great to be able to have the opportunity to speak to you and for you to help us raise awareness of what we do.
Yeah, very much so. We will be. So thanks very much for today, and until next time, everyone, take care.